Hi, everyone. My name is Sean Sweeney. I am the Director of Education and Special Programs at the Center for Nonprofit Advancement. We are very excited to have recently wrapped up our 2020 Excellence in Chief Executive Leadership Award, or Excel Award. We have a great crop of people this year who kind of stuck with us in the virtual setting that we were all working through. So I'll say this again later, but Maya, thank you so much for your help with all of that. We really appreciated it over the course of the process. So the point of the video today and future videos is actually to highlight best practices that came out during the process. This is one of 4 videos that will be made, this one focusing on avoiding founders syndrome. But we will get more to that soon. Right now, I'm going to introduce Ricardo Trujillo with GRF CPAs and Advisors, who was the award sponsor. Over to you, Ricardo.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Yes, so we're here today with our honorable mention, Maya Martin from Parents Amplifying Voices in Education. But I also wanted to take a second to thank all the other applicants and all the mentions, honorable mentions, and all the panelists as well for all the great work that has been done at this point. Again, my name is Ricardo Trujillo. I'm one of the audit partners at GRF CPAs and Advisors. Also, I'm excited to have just joined the board of the center recently here. So looking forward to helping the organization drive forward. GRF is actually one of the top 200 CPA firms in the nation. And as an independent firm local to the DC area, we have sponsored this award actually since 2007. So it's great. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sean to continue the conversation during this exciting celebration. Welcome, everyone.
Great, thank you, Ricardo. So we are joined today by our honorable mention, Maya Martin Cadogan, like Ricardo said, from Parents Amplifying Voices in Education, or PAVE. So one of the great things about Maya's application, interview, site visit that we learned throughout the process was just how impressive just the last 5 years at PAVE have been. It's only a 5-year-old organization, and in those 5 years, they've grown from just 1 person and a $50,000 budget to a staff of 13 people and a $2.5 million budget. So doing clearly awesome work and really growing, full steam ahead. So Maya, as the founder of the organization, has, of course, been the driving force behind all of this. And one of the things that so impressed the committee was the fact that some usual things that could provide kind of hiccups for some founders, PAVE is actually kind of figuring out a way to work around them. So that's really the point of our conversation today. So Maya, I think first question, if you could just kind of walk us through the mission of your organization and what you as a founder 5 years ago now kind of saw or didn't see in the community that you serve that you wanted to, that encouraged you to found PAVE.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So I think for me, one of the things that it's important about my experience at PAVE is that I was a former school leader. And so I worked here in the city of my birth, the city that 6 generations of my family are from, Washington, DC, to make sure that each of our kids throughout the city had the kind of education that they deserved. But even as I did that work and I started to help and work on big policy issues in our city that were driving us towards equity for our kids, what I realized is that there were some instances where parents were at the table and families and communities, but many times we were making decisions for them and not with them. And so when I founded PAVE, it was really in the spirit of trying to reimagine our education system to make sure that parents could be partners and leaders in creating the education system that they wanted to see for their own children. Oftentimes it will be leaders we will change, but what stays consistent are our families and our students. And so for the long-term strength of our city and the long-term strength of who our kids will grow up to be and how they will lead the city, we need to make sure that we have an education system that reflects the needs of our communities and the values of our families. And so that's the work that we do at PAVE. And so we're thinking at a really high level about how do we make systems change? How do we change the way in which our leaders in the city are incorporating parent voice, the kinds of policies that they're putting in place to support our schools, and then the kinds of work they're doing to implement in order to support each and every one of our kids in every single ward and community throughout our city. And so that's the work that we do here at PAVE. And my inspiration was really having been a child in that system at one point myself, having been a leader in that system and trying to make sure that every single person in DC could be a leader in that system as well. And so that's the work that we do here. And it's been amazing to see the work that our parent leaders have done while in the pandemic even. They met over 70 times with their council members, the mayor, elected officials to really push that work and to make sure that in a time when every other state and city was cutting their education budget, DC grew our education budget because of the advocacy and leadership work of our parent leaders. And so it's just so beautiful to see that vision come to life, where parents really can be leaders in our education policies.
Sorry, I was muted there. That is awesome. And we'll kind of go into our next question, speaking about the parent leaders. So a huge challenge that a lot of founders face is kind of, you're so in it and so worried about the success of your organization that you're worried to kind of loosen the grip and kind of let other people take the reins on certain aspects of the mission. So one thing that came across in the process with Maya's interview and site visit is that the team, being the staff and the parent leaders, all feel empowered to do the work and to have some autonomy over it. So I guess, my question is, how do you train your staff and those parent leaders as advocates so that you felt comfortable kind of giving up some of the control in these areas?
Yeah, I think one of the important things to know is that for founders, it's always going to be your baby. I compare it oftentimes to being like a parent. You birth something, you want to see it through, you want to make sure it can thrive. And so there is always that challenge of like, how do you make sure that you're not centralizing all the work in yourself, knowing that you are a little bit like Kronos, where you birth an organization out of your head, and where you're really dispersing that leadership throughout everyone who's a part of the organization. And I think one of the things that was important to me is making sure that what I know is that PAVE will last long past my leadership if everyone else feels ownership over the work, if they can talk about the work in a way that makes them feel great pride, and if they feel that they're growing inside of the work in their own leadership. And that's true both for our staff who are paid to do the work and our parent leaders who are doing this with their individual time off from raising children and families and their other jobs. And so I think it's really important for me as a leader, and I saw that from the beginning, to figure out how am I really making sure that people feel like they can own each of the departments that they're working in, the work that they're doing, and feel really great strength in growing inside of their projects and inside of their departments. And so we do that in a couple different ways at PAVE. We have a really robust evaluation system that's not meant to penalize, but rather meant to really take a step back, let people reflect and identify what kinds of growth they want to see for themselves. And what that's resulted in is, for a 5-year-old organization, 2 of our directors have been with us over 3 years each. So, that's pretty atypical in the startup world for folks to stay with you for that long. But I think that's part of what makes our work so strong and has allowed it to grow so fast, is that we really do have a committed and dedicated staff who are growing constantly in how they are demonstrating their own leadership and who really have ownership over their work. And the parents feel the same. When they talk about PAVE, they talk about PAVE belonging to them, and it does. It doesn't belong to me, even if I birthed it. It belongs to every single member of our organization and every single staff person.
Great, thank you so much. So you kind of touched on it a little bit in your answer, but I was wondering if you could talk us through, and especially in such a young organization, you might not even want to think about it, but if you could talk us through what your kind of plans are or thoughts are on succession planning, if you have any plans in place for an eventual change in leadership, either in your role or even on the board, or just more generally, and kind of how that conversation has been framed for you guys.
Yeah, I think for me, I've worked for a founder before, and I've seen what founders can kind of fall into in terms of you being the center of so much of the work. And then when the founder isn't available, that starts to crumble around the edges in terms of what that work looks like. And so that's something that I certainly have really focused on making sure that we can avoid as an organization. I think the important way to do that is to start planning early and making sure that you're thinking about who are those folks that you're cultivating and developing to take greater leadership over time. We're also looking for, we started a process to look for a deputy director, so someone who really knew the programmatic work of the organization, because many times you can hire folks to come in to do some of the other components around finance and operations. But our programs are really particular to the way in which we do the work and the way in which we've created a model for how we do parent engagement and advocacy at PAVE. And so we're working on that right now. And one of the things I specifically asked from funders was funding to be able to do that, not just for the creation of the job description and a profile, but also for the search. And so I had to get really particular and specific about the kinds of grant funding that I was asking for in order to make sure that the organization could be sustainable and that I could be sustainable. It's true for both. I think when you're thinking about what successions look like. And I think that's really important, especially as we go through the pandemic and people are oftentimes, especially in advocacy world, we're working 24/7 trying to make sure that families and communities are getting all the supports that they need to make it through this pandemic. And I'm over 40, right? So I'm getting to that place where I'm getting a little tired. And so succession is important both for the organization and the way in which it's doing the work, but also for the individual leader and making sure that not too much is centered in yourself, and that you have sustainability as well.
Thank you so much for that. So this actually is going to be the last question. So thank you so much again for joining us. And this is kind of more in terms of, when we do these awards and we do things like this, we want to make sure that we're sharing best practices with people. So this is kind of more of a question of kind of other people in a similar role maybe. So obviously, a 5-year-old organization isn't perfect. There's a lot of room to grow. And so we were just wondering, what are some of the areas for growth that you see related to this topic within your organization, and how do you plan on tackling them moving forward?
Yeah, I think for us, the sustainability piece is a real question, especially given the pandemic. Advocacy really is, even when in good times, advocacy is a 24/7 job, because you're oftentimes trying to make sure that people and communities are cared for, and our budgets and our values of our city and the things that we're demonstrating about how we're taking care of our people. And so in a pandemic, in an emergency situation that has now lasted 9 months, that is even more real. And so I think one of the things that we've realized is, how are we creating sustainability for our staff? And we've really tried to think about that hard. We do Pandemic Fridays, where every other Friday all of our staff have off, to create some balance, knowing that we have evening meetings and weekend meetings, because that's when parents can meet in their free time, quote unquote. And so we're trying to think about, what does that look like? We've provided work from home stipends. We provide a Wi-Fi stipend now, but I think there are real questions about how are we transitioning to work in this new age, given the pandemic, and then also how are we making sure that we're taking care of our staff really well throughout the duration of this pandemic period, which I think is longer than any of us anticipated or expected. And I think for us as a 5-year-old organization, it's a testament to what we had in place that we were able to switch to remote advocacy work and digital advocacy work so quickly. But those are real questions that we have about, what does that look like in terms of long term, because a lot of advocacy is about getting in front of people, and getting in front of people right now is hard. And so I think we have real questions about, how do we do that and do that well and make sure that that's sustainable for our staff.
Great. Thank you so much for this, Maya. I think this has been really helpful, and I'm excited to be able to share this with our network, because I think a lot of people will be able to learn from this. So I really appreciate your time, and want to say congratulations again to you for being one of our honorable mentions this year. So everyone, that really wraps it up. The point of these videos is to be nice and short and digestible. So I think this was pretty perfect, Maya, so thank you. So like I said, this is only one of 4 videos that will be offered following our Excel award process this year. So make sure you keep an eye out for all 4 of them. But with that, I would just say thanks again to Maya and Ricardo both for joining us, and hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you both. Take care.
Bye.